Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Summer Jazz Room at home. We are doing a sitting-in session with tonight's artist, Steve Turre. We're at home. Steve's at home, I'm at home, and hopefully you audience members are at home. We're lucky to have Steve with us tonight. Steve is one of the master trombonists who is still active today. He's performed with a long litany of greats and now is very well known as a band leader in his own right, and just a wonderful musician on so many levels. And thank you for joining us today, Steve.
It's a pleasure.
Great. Well, it's nice that you can join us for this COVID busting session of getting together and actually playing some music with musicians after such a long period. I wanted to ask you first about the band that you're bringing in, that the audience is going to hear after this interview airs. Tell us a little bit about, before we talk about you and your background and the other things, but I want to, what about these players? You're bringing in kind of a young band.
Yeah.
Who are these cats, and where did you hear them, and how did you kind of discover them?
Well, yes, it's a very young band, and it's that time in my life when, well, I'm getting older now, so it's not about the elders. I guess I'm one of them now. I'm 71, gonna be 72 in September. And I know when I was coming up, some of the older guys gave me a chance and an opportunity to play and develop. So I have some very young talent that really caught my ear, that I believe in them, and I think they're going to be future voices in the music.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I've been calling them and they've been hitting with me. And I think this is the second thing we've done together. And we're going to record, so a lot of what we're playing is going to be music from the new record. And of course, the more you can perform it before you record it, the better it is, because ideally, it's best not to have to look at the music or look at it too much. It's not like you're sight reading and you got to count every note.
Right.
You know, I know those records I did with Woody Shaw, the band had been on the road. And so by the time we got to the studio, we didn't even look at paper. We just count off and hit.
Right.
And so we're going to get there with this, because obviously recording studios are still closed.
Right.
But on the piano, a very talented young man, Isaiah Thompson. And I met him when I was teaching at Juilliard. And of course, he's finished with school now. And he's out there doing it. And a very dear friend of mine that passed away recently was Wallace Roney.
Yes,
I played
right.
on some of his gigs, and he played on one of my records. And he had a young tenor player with him, Emilio Modeste. And I really like him. You know, he's got a voice. He doesn't just play patterns that he heard in a book or something. You know, he plays his feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the young trumpet player, happens to be Wallace's son, Wallace Roney Jr. And he's got a voice. He plays so well. Of course, he had a good teacher.
Yeah, right.
And on the drums is Orion Toure. It's my son. He's still in his 20s, playing the drums, and he's got a nice touch. You know, he don't just beat the drums or overplay. I like him. He's kind of understated, and that's a rare thing these days, because everybody's trying to overplay.
Right.
And on the bass, he's not a super youngster, but he's not an oldster either, is the great Desron Douglas.
Yes.
And he's been doing some gigs with me. So for this, I have a sextet.
Right.
You know, it's a big stage and a decent budget, so I have an opportunity to put the full band a lot of times I have to do quartet or quintet, but it's nice to have the different voices and to be able to write some tunes with harmonized parts.
Right, right.
So most of what we're doing, except for maybe the first and the last tune, is original music of mine that's going to be on a new record.
Okay, great. So the other day when I was hearing you rehearse, you mentioned that you had written a reggae tune.
Yeah, I don't know if
and
we're going to get to that because I've got such a big program.
yeah, but that brought to mind the fact that, you know, I used to hear you play with Conjunto Libre and all sorts of, you know, in the 1980s, and of course you have quite a, you know, an extensive background in all sorts of music, in all sorts of different genres of music, we might say, from the African diaspora, if we want to be academic about it.
No,
But
ain't academic. That's truthful.
right.
That's not academic. That, in fact, that's something that's just starting to be recognized by academia now.
Right, right.
That's the truth. All the music, the blues, jazz, rock and roll, funk, samba, bossa nova, merengue, calypso,
Right,
son montuno, bomba, plena,
right,
cumbia, all that's part of African music. It has the rhythms
right,
from the land.
right. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about, you know, New York, when I, you know, was hearing you play at various locales in the 70s and the 80s, you know, there was an opportunity to play all these different types of music. And, you know, how did you feel like it was any sort of stretch going from one to another, or what sort of challenges were there, or things in common between them? I mean, of course, you mentioned the groove and the rhythm, but they all groove in different ways. I mean, did you have to kind of wear different hats in going from, you know, Conjunto
Yes,
Libre to Woody Shaw, for example?
absolutely. But in terms of uh, sound and attack and dynamic and harmonic language, obviously is different with salsa than with Woody Shaw. But you know, the common denominator is the rhythm, and it's about the dance. So if you feel the rhythm in your feet, in your bones, that ties it all together. When I played with Dizzy Gillespie with the United Nation Orchestra, you know, we had people from Brazil, from Dominican Republic, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from America, all the different countries. Jamaica, Monte Alexander played with us sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the common thing was we could all feel the rhythm together, you know, and so you learn the notes and then you listen.
Right.
And you don't try and put a square peg in a round hole and I'm going to play giant step changes over a montuno. No, listen to everybody and play the music that the band is playing. Be part of the band.
Mm-hmm.
That was my approach.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't try and prove nothing. I just tried to make music in a given situation. So I got to play Afro-Cuban music, which is salsa. And I also played with the Scotalites, which is Jamaican music. It's very different. It's got its own thing. Ska is the roots of reggae. There was a very great trombone player from Jamaica named Don Drummond that I wrote that song for.
Mm-hmm.
And also Brazilian music is a whole nother genre.
Right.
And that's my least experience. I have some experience playing with Claudio Roditi and also with, you know, Duduka and Nilson Mata and Romero Lumbambo.
Oh yeah, he's bad.
But not a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm not as comfortable in that genre, but likewise, I lay back and listen and blend. I don't play like salsa, you play strong. I don't play like that with Brazilian music. It's more delicate.
Right.
Then I've played with B.B. King and Buddy Guy and the real blues bands. And
Right.
I love that too, man. That's
Right.
jazz come from the blues.
Right.
I
Right.
played one time with John Lee Hooker, you know,
Yeah.
and then in Texas, I played with a guy that he's not a name that everybody know, but he played piano and he sang it. And I actually played bass, electric bass and accompanied him. But he played blues. I just listened and follow him. It wouldn't always be 12 bars. It might be 13. It might be 11 or 9 or
Right.
15. Wherever the feeling of the words take him, he
Yes.
change.
Well, that's the old. You listen to the old blues,
There you go.
pre instrumental blues. Those guitar play. Whenever they wanted to go to the four chord, they went to the four chord. Right.
And it was right.
Yeah. Right.
It was right. It was. And then of course I played with Ray Charles, and he did it all.
Right. Right.
You know, that was amazing.
Right. You mentioned Dizzy. I mean, and you know, Dizzy, of course, was such a master. I mean, just the roots of what we think of as modern jazz, and a master teacher, and as well, and a lot of what I remember you talking about when we were talking about the music. Often you would mention Dizzy and things that he had told you, or things that he had passed down to you. And I was wondering, when did you meet Dizzy, and how is it that you kind of got close to Diz?
Well, you know who Dizzy's #1 protege is?
John Faddis.
John Faddis.
Right.
And we're both from Oakland. I know John since high school.
I see.
And so Dizzy was playing in San Francisco one time, and I was talking to John. He said, man, why don't you come down and play with Diz tonight? I said, really? He said, yeah. And so I went down, and John introduced me, and I said, could I play a tune with you? And he said, yeah, all right, come on. And you know what he did?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, because he played a slow blues.
All right. Right.
Boom, 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 boom. And you can't just run a bunch of notes and stuff.
Right.
You got to leave space and talk and tell a story.
Right.
You know, I said, that's a good tech, because most other places they're going to call Cherokee on you or something.
Right, or some tune in a key that's strange, in the key.
Yeah, but he played a slow blues, and man, that was challenging.
Nice.
But we became friends, and then and some years later, I got another chance. I played with him, and it just grew from there. Same with JJ. I just met him, and at first we just acquaintances, and then we exchanged numbers. And whenever I go to LA with Roland Kirk or Cedar Walton, I call him, say hello. And eventually, we got to know each other, and then he played on one of my records. And man, there was a point just before JJ retired,
Mm-hmm.
and he called me, and he called Robin Eubanks, and he said, listen, I want to do a band with 3 trombones, and I want you and Robin and myself. Are you down for it? I said, yeah,
Right.
And then about a month later, before it became realization, he found out he had cancer.
Mm.
And, that was it. It never happened.
I had a similar situation with Horace Silver. He called me up and said, I'm putting together a 10-piece band, and so recommended you. And then, like 2 weeks later, the illness, was too pronounced, and they never got the recording session together.
See, that's
but at least I feel like, the fact that he called me on the phone, he'd pick up the phone and, hey, man, it's Horace Silver. Okay. That can remember that. That's.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you missed having a ball, because I played on that record with Horace, the Hard Bop Grandpa.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, with, I think, who was in the band? Ron Carter, Lewis Nash, Michael Brecker, Claudio Roditi.
Mm-hmm.
And his music is so much fun to play. It's just so happening.
No, it has so much appeal to the audience as well. It's just, it brings you in. It's kind of like just so friendly,
buoyant, and happy.
Yeah. So how is it that another question I've always wanted to ask you is, how is it you started to play the shells, and how did you develop like a technique? I know it's similar in to Afro-Cuban music, to having, say, a couple of congas or something and having a few pitches to work with, but it's such a unique thing that you do. And how does it that you started doing that?
Well, you know, I used to play with Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
All right.
And this go back to when I first played with him when I was 18 years old in San Francisco. And then after that, sitting in with him, every time he come to town, he called me, and I do the week in the local club with him. And he might give me $50 for the week or something. I didn't care. It was like going to school and getting a little gas money or something, you know.
Right.
Of course, every night after the gig, I give him a ride to the hotel and all that, you know, that's the least I
Right.
could do.
Right.
But he played the whole history of the music,
Right.
you know, from the old time blues to New Orleans style, and he played clarinet, or to Ellington, or to bebop, Charlie Parker, Dizzy, or to modal music, or even go outside. He did it all.
Right.
And he had this shell, and you know, one time he come to town, he had the shell, and for 3 or 4 nights it was just sitting there. So after the gig, you know, I said, well, when are you gonna play that? He said, well, I play when the time is right. So one night people were talking and everything. So he just picked, you know, Rahsaan was the champ of circular breathing, not Kenny G.
Right.
Rahsaan Roland Kirk was the world champ of circular breathing in jazz. And he picked up this shell and just hit the one note. But man, he held it for about 3 or 4 minutes until these people quit talking. And then they finally quit talking. They looked up like, you know, they realized something was going on. And everybody in the club, you know, you know, and it was so amazing that the show brought peace to chaos, you know.
Yeah.
And the sound of it really touched me. So after the gig was over, we were packing up. I asked him, can I blow on that? He said, yeah. And he let me blow it. And I said, oh man, I got to get one of these. So that was 1970, and I got my first shell. But then I discovered putting my hand in it, changed the pitch, and it's like trombone. With the trombone, when you put the slide out, the pitch goes down. With the shell, when you put your hand in, the pitch goes down. So it's very natural and similar to playing a trombone. Same embouchure, same airstream.
Right.
Takes a lot more air though. There's no throat in that mouthpiece.
Right.
But, you know, I have an interval of about a fourth for each shell. So depending on what I'm doing, I pick up different shells and play mostly rhythms and simple melodies, and I just listen to the rhythm and play the groove.
Right. Right. Right.
Now I'm going to do a tune on shells, but it's not Latin because we don't have hand drums or African drums. It's going to be a funky tune with shells, something I wrote.
I remember hearing you play some funk from the Bay Area on a recording. You know, I think it was something that you laid on me years ago when we were still using cassettes.
Oh, yeah.
You gave me a cassette, like a bunch of stuff. You made what we would call now a playlist or whatever we want to call it. But something was that there was some funk tune. Did you play funk in the Bay Area with a band? This might have been.
Of course, I played in R&B bands and blues bands. I used to play with Marvin Holmes and the Uptights, and then with the Herbert Mims East Bay Band.
Right.
And I did a recording with Santana, a Caravanserai.
Nice.
Of course, later I did an overdub recording on Supernatural in the horn section, but that was an overdub session.
Right.
And I also play out there. When I was out there, I played with Van Morrison.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just change gears for a sec. Ask a question that comes to mind in this particular time in history, going through what we're going through. You know, musicians have been sort of secluded at home and having to sort of keep themselves together musically, and some have been trying new projects. A lot have been discovering how to teach on the internet, or how to set up websites, or different ways of practicing. And what have you been doing in the environment of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we have had very little contact, and of course we have been unable to make music with others live, and of course the internet doesn't support the type of music making we need to do. What have you been kind of doing to kind of just keep yourself together, whether it's practice routine or anything else, other things that you've been doing just to kind of, with the time now of just being at home without gigs to go to?
Yeah, boy, I've had a lot of stuff canceled too, man. I was
Yeah.
supposed to go to the Johannesburg Jazz Festival in South Africa with my group, and that got canceled. I was supposed to go out to the San Francisco Jazz, that got canceled.
Yeah.
Plus a bunch of local things, you know, but
Yeah.
and the record date was supposed to be in April, but that got canceled. But from the end of February until June, I was doing some teaching online, you know, Zoom teaching, and it's okay. But honestly, from my perspective, it's not the same as being in person, because the quality of the sound is not like being there, and you can really help someone center their sound. I always try and get, before I'm going to teach a kid how to play some fancy intervals or fancy changes, I want them to get a good sound. You know, without a good sound, so many young players are sacrificing sound for speed. They're just trying to play as many notes they can. And I understand that. I was young once too, but without a quality sound to back it up, it doesn't really communicate. If you can play with beautiful sound and just play a melody meaningfully, that will touch your audience a lot more than playing giant steps triple time.
Right.
Believe me, it will. But if you can do it all with a good sound, hey, that's great.
Yeah.
So Zoom teaching, yeah, but it's better than nothing. I've done a few things where I have to record with headphones and you play what you hear. I did it and I did the best I could, but for me, I don't like it. It's not, it'll never take the place of playing real music with real people. It's sterile. It's not even like playing in the studio where you do an overdub session, because that way you have the phones, you're hearing the track, but you can also put yourself in the phones so you can hear yourself as part of the music. But when you're doing a Zoom overdub kind of thing, or on your phone, and then you sync it up and all that, but you're only hearing the headphones, you got to take one ear off it, you're removed from the track. It doesn't feel right to me. I do it, it's a gig, and it was interesting experience. But it's not like really playing music, because really playing music is a communication, not only between the musicians, but between that entity and the audience. It's a complete package, and the energy flows both directions.
Right, absolutely. Well,
and then, you know, of course, I've been practicing. I started out gung-ho, practicing like crazy, just because I had this time. And I actually burned myself out a little bit practicing too much. You can do that with a brass instrument.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's like a singer. What causes your voice vibrate? Your vocal cords. That's living tissue. With a brass instrument, your lips vibrating, that's living tissue too. You can blow yourself. I was practicing too much, so I had to learn to back off. And then also practicing a lot. And see, I don't practice what I play. I don't practice licks. I don't run changes and all that stuff. I practice long tones, lip slurs, scales, arpeggios. If I get all that done and have time, then I might work on some of my personal intervallic things that I utilize in improvisation. But the basic, the foundation to keep myself ready for whatever might come my way, that's what I practice. And then you practice all this, and then you don't have any place to let go and express your feelings through that.
Right.
It feels like you're doing it for nothing almost, but you aren't. You got to be ready.
Right.
We'll say that we've been rehearsing and getting ready for this, and I noticed a difference in my endurance, because as much as you practice at home, it's never like performing.
Right.
When you perform, another energy comes to you and you put it out there in relation to what everybody else is doing. You collectively bring that forth.
Right.
Practicing at home just can't get that. You got to mix that. That's got to be in balance with performance.
Right.
So that's been my experience.
Right. Right. Well, we're certainly, you know, really glad that we were able to put this series together and get musicians together to do that, to play with each other. As much as there won't be a live audience in Shea, and we won't have that sort of energy, there will be energy between the musicians. And so I want to thank you for, you know, sharing this little tidbits of knowledge and wisdom with us, and some of your experiences. And it's always great to hear from you, to hear you talk about these things, and of course, great to hear you play. And so thank you, Steve, for joining us tonight for this.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. And I look forward to making the music with some real musicians.
Yeah.
We might not have applause from the audience, but we're feeling each other.
Yeah, that's great. Well, for all of you at home, please stay tuned, because Steve Turre and Friends will be coming right up after this interview is finished. And thank you for joining us. And I hope you were able to join us this week for some of the other concerts as well. And please stay tuned to WP Presents for concerts in the fall. There will be concerts at this point open to the public. So please stay tuned. We will let you know about that as it develops. And thank you for joining us. Thanks again, Steve.
My pleasure.
Okay. I'm Tim Newman, and we'll see you in the fall, I hope. Thank you.